For some time now, Florida Georgia Line fans have been asking what in the actual hell went down between Tyler Hubbard and Brian Kelley that caused the duo to split from one another following their final performance out in August of 2022 at the Minnesota State Fair. And 2 years later, in 2024, this year, we are getting the in-depth details as to what seems to be the actual reason for the breakup. But what is very interesting and gaining a lot of attention is that Tyler Hubbard and Brian Kelley do not seem to be on the same page when it comes to telling the story on how Florida Georgia Line made the decision to break up. Just the other day, Tyler Hubbard appeared on the Bussin with the Boys podcast, where he shared his side of the story, his side of events that went down between him and Brian Kelley. But following that episode's release, very shortly following it, so much so that Bussin with the Boys held an emergency podcast, what they described, with Brian Kelley. So first, before we get into what Brian Kelley had to say, Brian Kelley's rebuttal, his clarification, I want to share with you what Tyler Hubbard had to say and kind of what sparked Brian Kelley's interest in coming onto the podcast and clarifying his side of the story. So first, when asked about the breakup and what sort of caused this between him and BK, Hubbard said, "For me, it was really unexpected, but BK came to me and said, 'Man, I'm really feeling like I want to do the solo thing.' I'm like, 'Really?' We were just getting out of our first deal. We were kind of in a sweet spot that we have worked 10 years to get to. And I'm like, 'Bro, why don't we just ride this thing out for like 5 more years, 10 more years, and then we can do the solo thing or whatever.' But again, I wanted to support him. He was adamant. 'Now's my time. I really need to do this for myself.' And I'm like, 'Well, all right, whatever you need to do, bro. What do you need from me?' He said, 'I just want support.' I said, 'All right, bro, you got it.' He added, 'We've had an incredible ride. This is where it's going to go. Like, let's do it. Crush it. And you never know. Maybe it can bring us back together, have a reunion tour or whatever.' But he definitely initiated the whole thing from the beginning. And when I say caught me off guard, it's not that we never mentioned it before. I didn't think it was going to happen then. You know what I mean? For him, it was the right time. Again, I thought I'll just stay in town and be a songwriter. Sounds like a fun gig, you know?" Hubbard went on to say, "There was definitely a period of time where I was confused. Like, bro, why? Like, why now? It felt like a divorce. BK even said, 'I still want to do Florida Georgia Line. I just still want to do the solo thing too.' And I had to tell him, I'm like, 'Bro, from an emotional standpoint, this is dramatic, but this is what it feels like. It feels like we're in a marriage and everything is great and we love the benefits, but you want to go sleep with the neighbors and come home at night and be cool with it. And just like jump back in bed and everything's cool emotionally. It feels like that.' I'm like, 'Bro, I can't do both.' I said, 'I'm going to give you the choice, but it's either Florida Georgia Line or solo career. Because also I don't have the capacity to like do 2 careers. It's also like going to get super sticky, like when we're writing songs, who we writing for, when we got 2 show offers and a FGL date and a solo date. Like, what are we taking here? Like, I don't even logistically see how that would work, much less emotionally. At the time, I was kind of like, man, like, dude, this sucks, bro. Like, look what we've built, you know what I'm saying? Together, you and me." So those comments from Tyler Hubbard is what really caught BK's attention, because Brian Kelley is now coming and telling his side of the story, where he's sharing that, yes, it was initially his idea, but casually just glossing over the idea that he wanted to stay in Florida Georgia Line while he worked on the solo career is not necessarily how Brian Kelley felt about this situation, and wanted to actually put his solo career on hold until Florida Georgia Line was completely finished with the upcoming deal that they were expected to be done with after releasing their 5th album. And what else is interesting, Brian Kelley is sharing that Tyler Hubbard was actually the first one to make the official jump into a solo career, and it all happened before the deal that they had in place, waiting until this last record dropped and their deal with their label on that record was finished. So here's what Brian Kelley had to say on the Bussin with the Boys podcast. He says, "We've had that conversation of extra outlets since 2016. He expounded on that initial statement where he added, extra outlets. We obviously keep doing FGL, but for me in my off time, when songwriters, creators are alone, you find even more of yourself. And there's going to be songs over the years that just being a songwriter, you know, I'm going to write that aren't going to fit the brand of FGL. So it was important to me to honor my craft, my artistry, my songwriting. So I had voiced that for a long time. And, we've kind of made a deal where once our fifth record is done, our term's up. We're going to create more freedom for ourselves. We're going to keep FGL going. We're going to put out some solo stuff. So it wasn't a surprise because the marker was in place once our deal came up. Brian Kelley also went into how he and Tyler Hubbard were trailblazers during their tenure in Florida Georgia Line. And Brian Kelley had an idea of wanting to continue to be, that trailblazer. He was trying to come up with a very good plan, a very detailed plan to make sure that Florida Georgia Line was set for, the next 10 years of their career. And he put a lot of thought behind this, trying to work out the kinks and the details of still doing a solo career, but also making Florida Georgia Line, the brand itself, the main priority. He was coming up with the idea that he and Tyler Hubbard could essentially open for Florida Georgia Line, giving it a 3-hour set. And Kelley made it very clear that it was not some casual idea to just leave Florida Georgia Line behind and go do his solo career and essentially let go of everything that the two of them had built. And it was important for him to come on the podcast and clarify that narrative in which Tyler Hubbard had shared with his side of the story. But what else is very interesting, Brian Kelley went into detail about how he was not even the first to release solo music. It was actually Tyler Hubbard. He says Tyler had solo music out before I even did, before we even got our fifth album out. He had released a couple of songs. He had played Biden's inauguration, which was a huge look to be playing a solo act with Tim McGraw. He released another song. I didn't start releasing music until April. That's the truth. He was rocking at radio immediately, top of January 2021, and I didn't get music out until April, and then the album in June. So after hearing Hubbard's side of the story and Brian Kelley's side of the story, it just simply sounds like an agreement was never reached between the two with this solo career idea. And Tyler decided to do the solo career. And before Brian Kelley could get his really off of the ground, and ultimately the two have went their separate ways. What else is interesting, Brian Kelley was asked what Kiss My Boots is about, who is it about, specifically Tyler Hubbard. Brian Kelley said it was not specific to any one person. I think that's important to make clear here as well, due to the rumors and speculation that have been circulating around the idea of that song, the lyrical content of that song. But he said that is not pointed at any one person. It was pointed to, it's pointed to several people. So, of course, guys, like always, we would love to know your thoughts on this down below in the comments. Now that we have both Tyler and Brian's side of the story, let us know down below. Thank you for tuning in here at CountryCast. That's your latest update. Be sure to hit that subscribe button below as well so you never miss out on any breaking news and updates.